Hello and welcome to the Chango mini webinar series, the latest in our series, this one entitled Why Creative Still Matters. My name is Dax Hammond, Chief Strategy and Revenue Officer at Chango. More about us in just a moment. A couple of quick housekeeping items. Bottom left-hand corner of your interface, you have a chat interface where you can reach out to us at any stage. Do please feel free to start asking questions throughout the presentation. I do believe that only you can see your own question, so we'll keep those private, but at the end of the session I will run through those questions, time allowing, and post them to our guest speaker. We call this a mini webinar series on purpose. We appreciate your time and understand that it's valuable, and we like to try and get you on and off the call in about 30 minutes. Sarah and I will stay on the call for another 10-15 minutes afterwards whilst we run through any final questions that we haven't had a chance to address, but you should be able to see and receive the vast majority of the content within that 30-minute window. And at the end of the session we will send you a link for both the deck on SlideShare and also a link to the audio recording from the presentation. Let me tell you a little bit about our guest speaker today. We're very lucky to have Sarah Lockwood from Booyah Advertising Agency based out in Denver. Sarah is currently the Vice President and Creative Group Director at Booyah. And interestingly, Sarah is very much a storyteller. Her biggest claim to fame recently was that a client TV commercial was actually turned into a Super Bowl ad. And if you want to see her work in action, then on YouTube, if you look up Dish TV and feet, then you should be able to see that campaign. It was hugely successful. In addition to that type of brand work, though, Sarah's agency also manages a great deal of direct response focused campaigns, and she's regularly to be heard pounding the drum for the need for more and better creative within digital media buying. But before I hand over to Sarah, I want to tell you a little bit first of all about Chango to make sure we're all familiar. Chango is a programmatic marketing platform, or a PMP. We combine all of the best parts of a DMP and a DSP for doing data management and media buying, but without all the problems of audience loss or data leakage that occurs when you try to pull disparate systems together. We're best known in the industry actually for some of our full-service media executions. We created this idea of keyword-level search retargeting, unlike the typical site retargeting that focuses on individuals who have already been to your site. Search retargeting finds brand new prospects for you who've never visited your site, but based on the searches they've been performing on Google, Yahoo, Bing. So when we talk about programmatic or when we talk about big data, then we very much operate in that world, and actually we found ourselves in the very fortuitous position of being the second largest source of search data in the US, UK, and Canada, just behind Google, which gives us a tremendous rich data source for working on behalf of our direct response advertisers within that search retargeting space. Now, when we look at how our industry has evolved, it's very clear that advertising has become very reliant on technology and data. You can't open an industry website or journal without finding some reference to this year's buzz terms of big data and programmatic marketing. And that's fine. These things have led to efficiencies that we've never had before in this industry, and have allowed for things like search retargeting or programmatic site retargeting to come about. But there is somewhat of a false high around big data, and there are some marketers who now are drinking the Kool-Aid to such a degree that they feel as though a good piece of data will be the be-all and end-all of the campaign and will lead to all of its success. But as we're going to talk about today, then clearly the story still matters. This shift, though, has caused marketers to see the world a little differently. For those of you that are eagle-eyed on the phone, you'll notice that this slide screenshot is from the Matrix films. It's the exact moment when Neo stops seeing the world as people and starts seeing the world as code. It's the way a lot of marketers are working today. They're looking at cookie IDs and analyzing them on a case-by-case basis and looking at the intent of the individual and then deciding how they're going to talk to them, at what price they're worth to them, and with what message. And we're already starting to see this penetrate into real life. This is a screenshot from Minority Report where Tom Cruise's character is walking through a shopping center and his eyeballs are being scanned and he's being shown commercials relevant to the data that's held about him. This might seem like science fiction, but it's amazing how many things from that movie have actually come true, and already we're starting to see real people having RFID chips embedded in their skin in order to interact with devices, which is also then going to lead, of course, into a new world of advertising. And everyone's jumping on this bandwagon. This graph from PubMatic's data shows shows the growth of RTB predicted over the next few years. Interestingly, since this study was put together, we actually feel that the growth is going to shoot past the 50% mark now with the arrival of the Facebook exchange. And if you look on Chango.com, you can find our previous webinar about the Facebook exchange and the opportunity that that presents for you. But before I hand over to Sarah, let's think about what our topic is here today. It's about the story and it's about the creative. We as an organization feel as though we're building all of these incredible algorithms and we have all this incredible data, but our hands are often tied by very poor creative or a very small number of creative that isn't relevant to the individual. And if you think about yourselves as consumers, you don't remember the network you saw a TV commercial on. You don't remember the radio station you heard a radio ad on. You probably don't even remember the newspaper you saw a clever bit of copy. What you remember is the Aflac duck, that hideous kiss on GoDaddy from the Super Bowl, and if you haven't seen it, do, but please not just before you're about to eat your lunch. Or if you're in the UK, as I see some of our people dialing in are, then the very famous drumming gorilla to the Phil Collins soundtrack for the Dairy Milk chocolate bar. That's the story you remember. It's the visual. It's the copy. And so at this stage, I'm going to hand over to Sarah Lockwood from Booyah, and she's going to walk us through why the creative still matters in a programmatic world.
Well, thanks, Dax, and thank you for having us, Chango. I'm excited to see the great turnout and the participants that we've attracted to this conversation. I think it's an exciting one, and I think it's a time for us to really challenge ourselves to move beyond sort of this comfort of the media buying and the reliance on the data, as Dax mentioned. I think it's interesting if you look at this slide, we're all happily potentially comfortable with this media buying and the opportunities that are afforded to us through real-time buying, but perhaps we're not really as smart as we think we are. We're buying our media in real time. We're optimizing, the buy second by second, but oftentimes we're really not allowing the creative to keep up. Often the creative is developed at the launch of a campaign, occasionally updated, and sometimes it's not really updated at all. And I think that we're missing a huge opportunity by really kind of treating the creative as a historic asset and not really thinking of it as a tool that's meant to persuade not just an audience, but now we need to persuade individuals. So let's think a little bit about kind of why this is happening. The root cause of this this challenge that we're facing, I think, really comes from three main reasons. One is the kind of the complacency or the comfort, if you will, that we have around this data. We have the bias towards optimization in the ways that are most comfortable for us, and we're generally a pretty analytical crew. Many people who plan digital campaigns really consider themselves to be objective and are most comfortable sort of in that spreadsheet world, whereas creative is often so far out of the comfort zone and assigned to an entirely different group of people and almost viewed as a deliverable to the media plan as opposed to something that's an integrated part of the optimization strategy. So I think we really need to challenge ourselves to move outside of that comfort zone and take better advantage of this opportunity. When we look at other reasons why we're delivering sort of inadequate creative, it's really about the expense. Often planners and clients perceive the creative as being too expensive, but it's really a mistake not to support the campaign with the right amount of creative or the right messages. We're really losing efficiency when we don't support it the right way. And then I also find a tendency to be very complacent with good enough. Even when people do believe in testing and do believe in sort of investing in creative, there does seem to come a point where people say, well, this is working and I like it and I'm comfortable with it, so let's just let this run. And I think that we have to challenge ourselves with that good enough mentality as well. So the net effect of kind of this habit, if you will, that we haven't broken, or this tendency which hasn't evolved, is that we're spending the money to target an individual, but we're still supporting the media plan with creative that shouts at the crowd. We're delivering the same message to individuals regardless of what we've spent a lot of money to know and understand about these people. So this is a huge area of inefficiency and one where I think we have nothing but opportunity. When we look at what the possibilities really are, I find it quite inspirational to check out a website called Which Test One. And this is a website that really concerns itself with A/B testing and optimization efforts, conversion rate optimization across all types of media, whether it's brand or direct response. They have a daily newsletter. They'll email you, and you can also pay for a premium membership and get much more in-depth case studies. So I definitely would encourage you to take a look at that. I just pulled a couple of examples that I think really illustrate some of the things we're going to talk about today. And this first example that you're looking at is relevant to California closets. So this was a paid search campaign, and they had a landing page, and in the example on the left, they aligned the headline to the SEM copy. And on the right, they used a general landing page with overview kind of headline. And what they found was 115% lift in conversion rate when they aligned the SEM copy with the landing page itself. And so this is just one little example of how impactful this can be. When we look at another example, this is a Facebook ad, and you'll see that really the image is exactly the same. They've made some changes to the headline as well as the copy. And the ad on the right-hand side had a 2,000% lift in click-through rate. My hypothesis to that would be there's a very action-oriented headline as opposed to something that's more just informational. And then in the text on the right-hand side, there's also kind of a learn more call to action at the end of the body copy. So those are some of the reasons why I believe this second creative was so much more successful. And there's no true answer. We don't always know why, but really our job as creatives is to create a hypothesis and then test it and try to create the insights and understandings that we can take from it and continually evolve towards better and better conversion. But you can see just by trying, you can achieve some incredible results. So as we consider how to make our buys more efficient and more effective with using the creative, I think it's helpful to kind of imagine a framework for understanding the role of each creative in the conversion process. So I think of the creative as telling a story. You're really trying to, again, persuade an individual to do the thing that you want them to do, to take a discrete action online. And each one of these creatives has a job in that process. So when we think about display, the first creative is really the initial point of contact, and that can be a desktop, mobile, tablet, social display ad, and really it's targeted on this individual based on expressed intent, whether that is part of like a behavioral buy or whatnot. You do know something about this person. You've spent money to target them through your media plan, so use that information for the very first creative. And the first creative is really meant to start a conversation, to get them intrigued, and to draw a click. And this example from a nice banner from Chango is really a question. What could get you more interested than a question that's relevant to you? The second creative is really meant to pay off the promise of the initial creative. In the case of display, this is really meant to drive a conversion event, and it's meant to kind of tell the rest of the story. So first creative gets you interested. The second creative tells the story. A third creative is sort of another take at it. It's an opportunity to retarget, remarket, and continue the conversation with this individual. So if they came to your website, they didn't convert on your landing page or even on your home page, other places throughout your site, the third creative is sort of more information. It's an additional piece of the story that the person maybe didn't encounter, or you want to have another opportunity to persuade them. then there's another second creative. So I think this is an important note. We don't have a first, second, third, fourth, fifth, sixth creative. The idea is that each one of these three creatives has a role. So the first and second go together, and the third and second then go together. So the second creative that you see on the far right, again, is driving a conversion event, and it's developing the story and delivering the next relevant piece of information that aligns with the third creative. So I think that framework can be very helpful as you really look at your work in practice. So on the display side, I really encourage everyone to sit down with your media plan and look at it at the placement level. Understand the use case, meaning who are you talking to? Where are they? Where are they in the conversion cycle or the consideration cycle? And really use the framework that we just talked about to document an appropriate first, second, and third creative for that individual. Once you have a plan documented, this is your opportunity as a planner, as a client, to support your media plan in the right way and make the investment in the creative. You need to understand what's required in order to do the very best job, and this practical flow will help you do that. On the search side, I think that many search marketers really don't think of the creative as something that's in their bailiwick, especially because landing pages are generally the responsibility of the client and are something that's in the world of the scary IT department. So I think we have to really challenge this and push harder to kind of demand the creative that we need. And the right way of doing this is by taking a look at your search program at the ad group level. Understand the use case, meaning what is the express intent of this audience through this keyword set? What are they trying to look for, and what's the story that we need to tell them? So again, apply the framework of first, second, and third creative to these ad groups and document the use case that you need to optimize your program and to drive the most efficiency and the best performance from the dollar. These types of practical applications, I think, will help you to really see a big lift in your programs. When you're looking, again, practically at your creative, I have just a couple of tips. You could do an entire webinar on this, and maybe I'll do that. But let's talk a little bit about the first creative. So again, we want to match the execution to the intent of the audience, going back to what is our media plan, what does our search program look like, what are these people doing, what do we know about them? And again, use your framework to document exactly what's required. Once you know what's required, don't just provide 3 sizes. The 300 by 250, the 728 by 90, the 160 by 600. Those 3 creative ad sizes are 80% of all of the served ad impressions. So if you push yourself to add additional sizes, you will have less competition for those sizes, and it may give you an opportunity to find someone and have an advantage over your competitors that are just sticking kind of with these same 3 ad formats. I particularly like the 300 by 600. I think it's a great unit, and specifically with mobile, you need to have more ad sizes than you can possibly imagine. Another best practice of first creative is challenge the champion. So again, test your large messages. Once you find the one that works, refine, 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 constantly refine, and challenge the champion until you're driving the most performance out of your creative. Some basic best practices of display ads. There should always be a persistent call to action. I'm amazed whenever I look at different creatives. For example, Moat is a great place to look. You can just see what brands are doing. So often there is not a persistent call to action on their banner ads. Look at your own banner ads. Make sure there is a call to action on every frame. And even a persistent offer if you can. For example, a free shipping badge or something that indicates 50% off. Whatever the offer might be, if that's relevant, make sure it's there, because while we would like to think that our audience is going to take the time and actually we're going to grab their attention from the very first frame of our animation all the way through the end, the reality is that's not true. So whenever we capture someone's attention, we want to make sure they know exactly what we want them to do and exactly why they should do it. I think persistent branding is also an important element that I see not always standardized. Some people like this sort of reveal idea, which is not saying what the brand is until the final frame of the banner. Studies tell us that's not a good strategy, and really what you're trying to do is establish trust and make sure that people know who's talking to them, and so really you should put your branding front and center. Another best practice is to make sure your final frame stands alone, to the point that someone isn't going to probably watch all of your animation. The final frame may be the only thing that they see at the end of your animation sequence, and so really everything needs to be in that message, in that final takeaway message. And then a basic is to follow the guidelines. And I know that we say that that's a basic, but from what I am told by partners, very often they're getting creative that doesn't conform to network's requirements, and this just results in loss of media dollars. Your ads need to be able to be served, and it would behoove you to do that testing and make sure that you're delivering creative that's compliant from the beginning. I also wanted to talk just about the third creative at this time, which is, again, to revisit that's our retargeting creative, our remarketing creative. And one of the best practices I wanted to touch on here is just to remind you that our entire use case strategy in terms of understanding what we know about this individual is based on the ability to understand what this person's done on your website. So you need to tag your website smart at the beginning. Think about the story that you're trying to tell. An individual who's left your site on the home page is different than the story you would tell to someone maybe who's gone all the way down through granular product information or pricing information. And that story is even different from what you might tell someone who has abandoned a shopping cart. So these are all opportunities where if you've thought about your strategy at the beginning and tagged your site the right way at the beginning, you can then really speak to the individual and tell a compelling story when you find them out in the wild. The next best practice I just wanted to talk about was the second creative, which is the landing page. And again, it's critical that we're delivering relevance by pairing the message closely to the first creative. So you really have to pay off that promise. And you saw in our examples of the SEM ad and the landing page aligning the headline, this really can pay off. So I would encourage you to go back and evaluate your own campaigns and make sure you're doing this. Establish trust. Make sure that the audience feels they're in the right place. So having that alignment is one way you can do that, but also by putting sort of the brand front and center and making sure that all of the information on the landing page sort of ladders up to the story that you're telling will make them feel like they are where they expect to be and they won't just immediately abandon. To that point, you should also, when you're thinking about your landing pages, think about the communication objectives and prioritize them. So what is the first thing you want this person to do? What's the second thing you want them to do? What's the third thing you want them to do? What's the one thing you want them to know about your company or about your offer or about your product? These are the types of this is kind of the creative brief, if you will, that's going to drive, what should be on that landing page and in what priority those call to action should occur. I spoke to synergy and headlines, the call to action above the fold. So the call to action should be very clear. It should be above the fold. Think about this when you're looking at your forms. I frequently see, forms that will start above the fold but have multiple, have content or form fields that mean that the call to action button actually falls below the fold. So really challenge yourself to only ask for as much information as is necessary, or reformat that form in such a way that the entire data can be collected above the fold. We talked about all the elements laddering up to the objectives. some tools that are very helpful. So I like to look at landing pages and try to analyze them beyond just what the click tells us. Obviously you can use analytics packages to do that, but there are additional tools like Crazy Egg or ClickTail, which are heat mapping softwares that will help you to kind of see where people's mouses are lingering and where people are clicking that you might not expect that they would, or some additional data points that can give you insight and help you to formulate, hypothesis for how you might change that page in the future. And to that point, really don't forget to just test and learn. The entire objective is, establish a baseline and then challenge the champion. Make your best hypothesis for what is working and what is compelling your audience based on the tools that you have, which may be Google Analytics, which may be these other tools like Crazy Egg or ClickTail, and then use that data to make your own recommendations about what you should do next. And finally, just to wrap up, I know we're getting close to our time, there are really kind of 5 key takeaways that I want you to remember when you're thinking about this webinar. First off, I hope I've convinced you that the creative really does matter. Don't do a disservice to your carefully crafted media plan and the amazing partners that you've selected on that plan by not giving them the best way to be successful, and that means giving them creative that aligns with the needs of the audience and is going to be persuasive to that audience, and make sure there's plenty of that creative. If you need inspiration, there are lots of places for that. Which Test One is a great one, and I love Moat just as places to kind of nose around and find inspiration and kind of get a new idea for something to test. The third is, again, develop and understand the use cases and establish a framework that matches the audience. Document this and use this documentation to hold yourself accountable for having the right kind of creative, and to really explain to the client or to your internal audience why you need this creative to deliver a highly efficient and highly profitable campaign. And then lastly, test and learn. So don't be complacent once you find something that works. Keep trying and keep trying to optimize the campaign with new creative and better creative. And I think if you do those things, what you're going to find is some new efficiencies and kind of an additional tool in the toolbox to drive better performance from your media. So with that, I'll hand this back to Dax.
Wow, indeed. I think my biggest key takeaway there is, we as an organization focusing on our data and platforms often have ad ops teams, strategy teams, data science teams busting a gut to try and get 10, 20% incremental increase every month in performance. And then if you make a small change to your creative, as we saw in one example, you can get a 2,666% increase in your performance. So clearly, I think with some of these statistics and arguments, we've demonstrated that that the creative really matters. So what we do at this stage is we take your questions. Down in the bottom left-hand corner of your interface, you will see a question box, and feel free to ask those. A couple of those have already started to come in already, and I'm going to pose those to Sarah momentarily. Just before I do, then I do want to point out on Wednesday, April 24th at 1 p.m., the next in our mini webinar series will be taking place. You have to listen to me again, I'm afraid, but it's exposing display media measurement, and it's one of my most passionate topics around view-through attribution and the role of view-through versus click metrics. The registration page for that webinar will be available on Wednesday the 20th, but chango.com/webinars. Okay, so let's jump into our questions. We have a few here that are coming in already. The first one from Jason: by a consistent call to action, does that need to be a button, or should the call to action be in the form of a button to get a click?
Hey, Jason. So, my opinion on this is that this is an area that you should test. There's no right answer on creative. I would say a best practice would be to create a button, because users are conditioned to understand a button means click, it means move to the next step. Often the shape of the button, the color of the button, the language of the button, these are areas that you should test and learn. But I do see creative from time to time where people will almost use the content of the ad, so to speak, to actually ask you to click. And really, almost all display ads are going to let you kind of click anywhere to progress. So I would recommend that this is something that you test, but my bias would be that a button would be most compelling.
Great. So next question in from Ben. The IAB recently released new ad formats, i.e. they're rising stars. Some of them are much larger than the standard ads we're currently used to working with. Should we approach these creatives differently? Any best practices or ideas you care to share?
Sure, that's a great question, Ben. So we are using a lot of rising star units, and they are a little bit different from kind of some of the standard IAB ad units, which are typically used in more of a DR or retargeting format. Rising star units are generally rich media ads. They're usually HTML5, and that means that they have a much larger footprint. They are much more interactive, and they're typically used more for a brand type of placement, so something that's more reach, something that typically includes video content, or something that's really about driving engagement. Engagement is, a little bit different from your typical DR metrics, and we can talk about how you might measure those things, but some of the best practices really are to think about different executions based on the use case. For example, in your media buy, if you know someone is on a tablet, you may want to take advantage of a tablet with things that are like swipe movements as opposed to click movements that you might use on a desktop. You should really just think about where this person is encountering this creative and really maximize the sort of persuasiveness of the ad by making it native and make it feel right. Some other things I think that can be interesting about rising stars are just the creativity that it allows you to have. I think you really should think about when you're making a media buy and including these large formats to make sure you have a story to tell and make sure that you're providing enough information for someone to really interact with it and take something away. It's a shame when somebody invests in this type of a unit and then doesn't do as much with it as they should.
Okay, time here just for another couple of quick questions. First of all, one here addressed to me. Does Chango have DCO or dynamic creative optimization tools built in it? So as an organization, we take two approaches to dynamic creative. There are certain things that we do built into the system at no charge. So for instance, with search retargeting, we can dynamically insert the actual keyword that triggered the ad, which is an extremely effective mechanism. Depending then on what a client wants to do, we partner with best-of-breed organizations for doing dynamic creative, or we use what's in our platform. Feel free to reach out to us with your specific needs, and we can tell you how we would address that. Question then for Sarah, just before we wrap up. What is meant by challenge the champion? You mentioned it a couple of times in your presentation. Are you referring to targeting market leaders in the space?
Thanks, Steve. So what I mean by challenge the champion is really a testing methodology, and there are many different ways to go through testing. There's very formal, statistically significant methods, and then there's more informal methods. Both can be effective, and it's really what's right for you. But when I say challenge the champion, I'm talking about establishing a baseline of performance. And perhaps you have multiple creatives, 1, 2, 3 that you're sort of running in parallel and optimizing to conversion. Once you have a winner, I call that the champion. And then our job as creatives and marketers then is to create a hypothesis for what we could do better in that creative to drive even better contribution to conversion. So challenge the champion by establishing a baseline and then creating a hypothesis and testing and learning. So that's what I mean. Hopefully that's helpful to you.
And we've got time for one final question here from Austin. Sarah, we talked a lot about the IAB type units, but as a Super Bowl commercial producer, do you have any tips to answer Austin's question around what he needs to know for video?
Sure. Thanks, Austin. That's a great question. Video is unto itself an entire topic, but a couple quick tips that I would give you. Think about pre-roll, mid-roll, post-roll. Understand sort of where your ad is going to where your visitor is going to encounter your ad and what their circumstances are. Think about skippable video content. So understand where the skippable opportunity happens in a video and make sure you're getting your message in before that, i.e. if it's like skippable after 5 seconds, make sure at the beginning you might want to have a slate at the beginning of your video that says the most important information that you want this person to take away or a call to action to click before they skip the ad. I would say think about voiceovers. With pre-roll, we very often recommend a voiceover that says, click now. Something people do what you tell them to do. It's sort of amazing. But yeah, a voiceover can actually help you get more clicks. And then again, I really believe in the persistent call to action. So on your video content, you can do kind of an overlay that's persistent on the entire pre-roll. That asks people to click. There are some amazing units that you can buy now that let you sort of have self-direct through video overlays on top of video that let you go see more video content. And I think that this is an area that there's just, there's endless opportunity to talk about how to optimize video.
Thank you, Sarah. A little known fact about Sarah that she shared during our prep is that before becoming a creative director and Super Bowl ad producer, she was actually a voiceover artist for a very wide range of random products, and so certainly has some good opinions and expertise in that area. So at this stage, we are going to draw it to a close. We thank you all for coming, and we thank you all for your questions. Feel free to reach out to myself or to Sarah. We will be sending you a link to the recording of this presentation and also to the deck itself. Chango.com/resources, where you can find our 5 current white papers on everything from retargeting for retailers through to the Facebook Exchange Handbook and my passionate topic of view through attribution exposed. And as I said a few moments ago, you will also find tomorrow our site will update on chango.com/webinars, and you can register for our next upcoming webinar in the mini-series on Wednesday, April the 24th at 1 p.m. Eastern, exposing display media measurement. So thank you again for joining us, and we hope to see you again at future events.
Thank you. Please stand by.